So, as we get ready for the beginning of the season and getting ready to do the most hated video that I will do throughout the season, also known as the prediction, because I'm usually going to get a lot of hate and a lot of kind of scrutiny from people that watch the video and basically are going to type in the comment section saying that I put your team way too low and some of your reason are just it doesn't make any sense and you know nothing about soccer or football. But before we do that, we're going to first talk about the biggest problem each MLS team will face this season. And I know at the top it's kind of faded a little bit because I accidentally dropped the board about a couple of seconds ago, and part of my shirt kind of smudged the top of the board a little bit. And just like what I did with one thing that each MLS team need to do in order to make the playoffs, I am going to split this into two videos where I'm going to do the Western Conference today and the Eastern Conference will be tomorrow. So, first of all, we'll start with the Rapids, and like last time, I'm going to go alphabetical order. And for the Colorado Rapids, one of the biggest problems that they need to face heading into this season is the goalkeeper position and also lack of depth. So, kind of two things that I put in terms of the biggest problem they have heading into this season. And, obviously, Tim Howard, this is his farewell season, and, he is, of course, going to be doing his farewell tour this season. And, I don't know if he's going to be good, and the fact that he's going to perform like he was doing his prime. Well, actually, he probably won't be performing as good as doing his prime. I mean, the last 2 years, Tim Howard looked absolutely washed up, and it was really like when he announced that retirement. It wasn't just the fact that people were kind of sad that he's finally retiring, but there was kind of relief, the fact that he is going to finally retire and finally realize that he is completely washed up and that he should have hung up his boots about a couple of years ago. So, I don't know if he's going to make the same mistake that he's been making for the last 2 seasons and look absolutely washed up. And also the lack of depth. So they brought a lot of big veteran kind of pieces, as I mentioned, throughout this off season. But what happened if some of those big pieces go down with an injury? What happened guys like Benny Feilhaber or Diego Rubio or even Kai Kamara went down with an injury? Then they going to have to rely on guys that were starters for this team for the last couple of seasons, and those players are clearly not good enough in terms of playing in the MLS. Although they do have a couple of decent kind of young talented player on that team. Guys like Cole Bassett and Sam Vines could be an option in terms of the depth, but let's be honest, there is not a lot of depth for this Rapids team. And if some of those players that they bought in throughout this offseason get injured and they do not perform well, then they are kind of a little bit screwed and they're back to square one like they were last season. For FC Dallas, lack of goal scoring threat. And this was a problem for them last year where nobody on that team scored double-digit goal. And, last season, even though they did score a lot of goals, well, I wouldn't say a lot of goals. I think they scored like around 50 goals last season. But the reason why they scored that much goal was because last season I always talk about how FC Dallas always find a way to score goals. Somebody always kind of contribute that, which is not a bad way to do in terms of approaching toward a game where you know that somebody eventually is going to score. But what happened when that does not happen? And that's what happened in the second half of the season, where once you have nobody on that team can score goals, and nobody can really step up to trying to score those goals for you in the game. That's when you saw FC Dallas kind of fade away, and that is going to be a problem that they're going to have again this season, because they have a bunch of young kind of talented player on that team that I don't know if they're ready for MLS. And I also heard that they bought a a striker this offseason, and I'm not even going to pronounce his name. His name is incredibly hard to pronounce, but he does have a nickname called the Kropra, and he is a Czech striker that comes from the Polish league, and, they're hoping that he will be kind of the Maxi Urruti, and he will be the guy that is going to be scoring goals for them and be that goal scorer. But certainly, I think FC Dallas, even if he does perform very well, I just don't see, like, when I look at that team, I just don't see guys that is going to be a goal scorer and is a threat in terms of scoring goals. So that is something that FC Dallas is going to have a lot of problem heading into this season. For the Dynamo, the back line and balancing CCL and MLS. And this second part really depends on if they do move on into the next round of CCL. If they don't, then that's probably a thing that they don't have to worry about, since the CCL starts tomorrow, and that the second leg is actually just before the opening week of MLS. But one thing that they do definitely have to worry about is the back line. Like, that back line, when you look at it, it does not look good at all. And there is definitely a lot of concern right now with the Dynamo about their back line, of how, it just, not only there's no depth in that back line, but the players in that back line are just like not MLS quality kind of player. And throughout this season, I think the Dynamo is going to really concede a lot of goal if they cannot fix their back line. And really, for this team, I know this is a team that really relies on the counter attack and really want to give the ball to the front three guys like Kyoto, Elise, and Maniltes. They want to give the ball to them so that they can breeze by defender. But you can't do that unless you have a back line that basically can play the ball to those players. And yeah, so that is going to be something that the Dynamo need to maybe address in these remaining part of the offseason, or even during the season. For the Galaxy, it's the same thing. The back line and the goalkeeper problem. Now, the Galaxy did get Diego Polenta, and I'm not sure if... I know Polenta is probably going to be a big improvement in that defense, but I'm not sure it's enough. I mean, they pretty much brought in their entire back line minus Michael Ciani and Ashley Cole, and yeah, those two players, Ciani, he was definitely the guy that a lot of Galaxy fans kind of criticized of the mistakes that he made on the defensive end, but he wasn't really the only guy that was making mistakes. That entire back line made so many mistakes and concede just sloppy goals. And even with Polenta in there, I don't know if it's going to be enough for this team. I still think this team is going to concede a lot of goals this season, and they're going to really hope that attack will basically bail them out, and just hope that Zlatan can basically bail him out. Which, speaking of Zlatan, he actually made a very bold statement today saying that he's going to own every single record by the end of the season. Okay, yeah, so does that mean you're going to break Joseph Martinez's goal scoring record? That you're going to score more than 31 goals this season, and that you're going to catch Wando in terms of that goal scoring record, or the most goal scorer ever in MLS by a player? Yeah, I don't know, okay? So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it is, and a lot of people is going to really laugh if he does not achieve that, and I have a feeling he probably won't achieve it. This is just classic Zlatan, bringing his ego and basically trying to raise expectation. The fact that, yeah, I'm definitely going to do this, and I've been proving so far this season or throughout my career, that I have backed up on some of the bold things that I said. Although one thing I will say about Zlatan is that he is 1 year older now, and he is getting to a time where, yeah, he's about to retire, okay? As much as, and I know some Zlatan fans will say that he is God and stuff like that. No, he's not, okay? I'm sorry to break that news to you. But moving on, LAFC, the Galaxy crosstown rival. What is their biggest problem? Well, it's kind of the same thing as last year. Lack of depth in that midfield and defense. Now, they did report that they're going to pick up Lamar Batista in terms of that defense, which would really add in some depth in that defense that really needs some depth piece, but still, they still do not really have a lot of players on the defensive end, and that we saw last season when once Mark Anthony K went down in that midfield just really kind of collapsed in many ways. And even though Atuesta, when he came in, he kind of did a decent job, it wasn't enough for that for that midfield to at times look very kind of sloppy. And also that defensive area, I mean, losing Lawrence Simon was huge, and once they lost Simon in that team, and they were hoping that maybe Danilo Silva was going to be the guy that could maybe replace Simon. No, it wasn't the case, especially what happened in the playoffs. So that is going to be once again a problem that LAFC is facing, which is why I'm always saying they need to think about start signing defenders. You've been signing so many strikers, which is good if you want to be entertaining and want to score goals, but you also got to remember you have to make sure that you don't end up like what the Galaxy is having in terms of their problem, which is they score a ton of goals, but their backline looks very weak and very vulnerable. For the Portland Timbers, the striker position and the 12-game road trip. Now, the striker position is probably going to be something that they're going to be fixed by the start of the season, because they are heavily rumored to get Vargas from Tigres. But the 12-game road trip is going to be something that they are going to have to maneuver, and it is going to be tough, and I really wish you luck, Portland, in terms of maneuvering that 12-game road trip. I mean, even if they don't do well in this 12-game road trip, even though if they find themselves at the bottom of the table in the Western Conference after that 12-game road trip, I still think this team could do something what DC did last year, which is having a resurgence and start to win all the home games late in the season. But like I said before, I know that they're capable to do that, but they don't really need to do that, and they can guarantee themselves that they don't have to really spend a lot of effort in the second half and really just have to win those second half home games if they do well in that 12-game road trip, which is easier said to be done. Consider the fact that you're on the road for so long and that you're on the road for the first 3 months of the season. Next up, RSL. So their biggest problem is the striker position, and I said it many times before of how they don't really have kind of a true striker on that team. I think the closest true striker they have on that team is Corey Bear, and as much as he is one of my favorite player and that he won the Rookie of the Year last year, I still don't think Bear is going to be the guy that you're going to just heavily rely on the goal scoring department. Now, they did get Sam Johnson as a striker in this off season, and they of course signed him on a DP contract, but Sam Johnson comes from the Norwegian league, and one thing I've been saying many times of how players come in Scandinavian league, they don't usually do very well heading into MLS. So yeah, unless Sam Johnson can basically prove me wrong on that statement, RSL is still going to have a problem in terms of that number 9 spot. Next up, the Quakes, pretty much everything. And I don't say this with a grain of salt. It is really a something that we are definitely going to have a lot of problems heading into this season. I mean, the goalkeeping situation, with JT Marcinkowski basically going to be kind of a full-time goalkeeper for us. I don't know if he's going to do well. I mean, he did show some flashes of brilliance last season, but he did still kind of made some mistake heading into last season when he took over for Tarbell. And then, the defense, I mean, I don't know. Like, that defense still really scared me, and especially the fact that we didn't sign anybody in terms... I mean, we did sign Lopez to finally address that left back situation that we desperately been trying to address for the last 2 years. I don't know is it going to be enough in terms of fixing that back line. And keep in mind, Lopez is not really a left back. He's more of a left winger, and that, He's going to be committing more forward than he is going to try to maybe track back and defend. So that could be a little bit concerned in that department. And also, he's only 19 years old. I mean, to give a 19-year-old kid and all that pressure of him actually do well in that fullback position, yeah, I feel like if Quakes fans are going to criticize the fact that Lopez does not play very well for the first couple of games, I'm sorry, but you are not a true Quakes fan and you don't know anything about soccer, because you cannot expect a 19-year-old to basically just single-handedly expect to do well in that fullback position, especially the fact that even though they said that he's a left back, he is kind of more of a winger, and he likes to go bomb for more than he actually really want to track back. And then you look at the midfield. I mean, that midfield is still very slow and do not have a lot of creativity. And then going forward, in terms of the goal scoring department, you're hoping Wando could not only break the record, but also get 10 goals a season. And then you also hope that Danny Houston can actually maintain his good form. I mean, last season he was pretty good for the first half of the season, and then he went ice cold in the second half of the season. And then besides that, who else you're going to rely on goal scoring? Vaco? I mean, Vaco at times he can really turn it on, but he is still at times being just so selfish and not really willing to pass the ball to his teammate, even though his teammate is in a very good spot to basically put the ball into the back of the net. So the bottom line is, this team still have a lot of problem, and this is why I'm not bringing a lot of high hopes heading into this season, even though Almeida is in charge of this. And I know we did win 3-0 against LAFC, and I also note that LAFC did actually play their first team in the first half, and we actually did very well against their first team. But then again, it's preseason, and that until I start seeing that kind of performance in the regular season, then come back at me and say that, I was proven wrong, that this team can actually do something. And as I said many times before this off season, I really want them to prove me wrong. I want them to prove me wrong, that they can bring a little bit hope in terms of them actually doing very well this season. But as of now, I'm kind of being just pessimistic and not really just kind of being hopeful that this team can instantly just become playoff competitor, even though they just kept the same team that they did last season. Meanwhile, moving on, Seattle. They need to get off to a good start. I mean, that is really kind of the only thing that I'll say. Although the other things that I will say is that what is going to be how does Chad Marshall and Jordan Morris coming back from a horrific leg injury would do for this team. I mean, Chad Marshall, obviously, since he's so old now, it is going to be very, very tough for him to try to come back from that injury. And I haven't heard anything about him retiring, which is a great news to hear, because I thought for sure that maybe it was a big possibility that injury could have ended his career, but apparently not. And then Jordan Morris, I mean, just so injury prone these last couple of years, and coming back from that torn ACL that he suffered in the last preseason, is he gonna do very well? And he's even gonna be starting for this team, because now with Roy Diaz on this team, unless Schmetzer decided to play two up front, I don't know where Jordan Morris actually fit in this team, and that maybe Schmetzer would put him out of position. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. We'll see how they will solve that issue. And then for Sporting KC, it's the striker position, and this has been a problem that they've been having for a long time now, and yet somehow, even with this problem, they still do very well at the end of the season, and it's a team that usually always make the playoffs, despite the fact that this is always something that everybody said Sporting KC have whenever the season began. And this season, I think, is even a more desperate situation, because they really don't have a striker. I mean, the only striker that they have on their team is Christian Nemeth, who didn't really play a lot last season or even start for this team a lot. So what are they going to do? Like, they need to eventually think about getting a striker. They can't not rely on Diego Rubio anymore because they sold him off. So what do you do now? I mean, that will be interesting. And will does that mean that Sporting KC will just not play a striker and just go false nine position coming into this season? I mean, that's not a bad idea for Peter Remise to just put a false nine in this team. I mean, it's some, when you don't have a striker, that is really usually the only choice that you have left in the team. So, yeah, that is something that, I'm going to say that is their biggest problem heading into this season. But since this has been a problem for them every single season coming into a new season, and that they seems to do fine with it and just don't really kind of address with the issue but still looks fine with it, I don't think this is going to be actually a big problem for them. And then finally, with the Whitecaps, well, they lack team chemistry, and there is just so much unknown in terms of the players that they bought. So they bought a lot of players this offseason. They completely overhaul the team, and Marc Dos Santos basically just built this squad from scratch, and it's almost as if the Whitecaps are like the second expansion team coming into this season. I mean, I know we have FC Cincinnati coming into the league, but for the Whitecaps, they're kind of like a second expansion team because they have so many new guys on their team that, we don't know what we expected from them. I mean, they could be a very good team this season, or they could just completely collapse and all those guys that they signed will turns out to be big bust. We don't know. So that is, I mean, as much as Whitecaps fans are very excited about this season, I think they also have to be a little bit nervous heading into this season and kind of need to remember that this is a complete new squad, and that, I won't be surprised if they don't make the playoffs in the first season, because you rarely see teams that just made a squad overhaul and bring in a new coach, and then the first season they immediately do very well and basically compete for MLS Cup. It doesn't usually happen a lot. So, yeah, there you go. That is pretty much it for the biggest problem each MLS team have coming into this upcoming season, the Western Conference edition. Tomorrow I'll do the Eastern Conference edition. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.